the billionaire who swore never to love again until she shattered his every defense. Hey there, my beautiful story family. Trust you're doing well. Today, I feel really excited to share another heartwarming tale of love with you. But your poor engagement to last week's story absolutely broke my heart. I spend 12 to 15 hours every day researching, writing, and extensively editing these stories just for you, my family. You're not just viewers, you're part of this amazing family of story lovers we're building together. Every like, every comment, every share means the world to me and keeps these stories coming. Now, get ready, because today's story? It's going to touch your heart in ways you never expected. Just last weekend, I was at the Cineplex in downtown Boston, standing in line for popcorn. In front of me, a man in an expensive suit was arguing with the cashier over a declined credit card. Before I could step in, the woman behind the counter quietly paid for his snacks. You needed to see the look on his face, pure shock mixed with something deeper. He tried to repay her, but she just smiled and said, "Don't worry, sir. Even strong people need a little kindness too." Smiling back, he thanked her while walking away. That moment, as little as it was, stuck with me because it showed how one simple act can break down the tallest walls. Before we get into today's powerful story, I'd love to use this moment to connect with you, my beautiful family. I want to know where in the world you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below and tell me, have you ever met someone who completely changed your view of the world? You know, that person who walked into your life and turned everything upside down in the best possible way. Maybe you fought it at first, maybe you weren't ready, but looking back now, you can't help but smile. Those are the moments that remind us sometimes the best chapters of our lives start with a no. Now, let me take you to the heart of Boston, where two worlds are about to collide. In one corner, we have a man who built an empire on the belief that love is a weakness. In the other, a woman whose family legacy means everything. What happens when his billions meet her determination? When pride faces off against passion? Hold on to your seats and make sure you've hit that subscribe button, because this story of walls coming down and hearts opening up is unlike anything I've shared before. And trust me, what these two discover about themselves will make you believe in second chances all over again. Marcus Blackwood wasn't born into wealth. He clawed his way up from Chicago's South Side, where he spent his childhood watching his single mother work 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. By age 16, he was coding in a borrowed laptop at the public library, staying until closing time every night. That determination turned into his first app at 22, and now, at 38, he's the force behind Black Tech Industries, one of America's fastest-growing tech empires. Standing at 6 feet 2 inches with steel-gray eyes that could freeze a boardroom, Marcus commands attention without saying a word. His trademark charcoal suits and perpetual 5 o'clock shadow have graced more magazine covers than he cares to count. But beneath that polished exterior lies a man who trusts spreadsheets more than smiles and contracts more than promises. 5 years ago, Marcus had it all, including a fiancée he thought was his perfect match. Until he discovered she'd been selling company secrets to his biggest competitor, all while planning their wedding. The betrayal didn't just end their relationship, it reinforced everything he'd learned in his hard-knock childhood. Trust is a liability, and love is just another word for weakness. Now, Marcus lives by a strict code: no relationships, no complications, no exceptions. His personal life is as minimalist as his penthouse apartment, pristine, controlled, and completely empty of meaningful connections. He channels all his passion into his work, expanding Black Tech's reach across the globe. His latest project? Transforming an aging block of downtown Boston into a cutting-edge tech hub. It's the kind of deal he could do in his sleep, at least it was, until a stubborn baker with fire in her eyes dared to stand in his way. The press calls him the Ice King of Tech, and Marcus wears that title like armor. But even he isn't prepared for someone who makes him question whether his carefully constructed walls are keeping pain out or locking happiness away. On the other end, there's Rose Bennett. At 32, she carries the legacy of 3 generations in every loaf of bread she bakes. Her copper-red curls are often dusted with flour, and her green eyes sparkle with the same determination that helped her grandmother turn a tiny bakery into a Boston landmark. Bennett's Bakery and Cafe isn't just a business, it's the heart of Beacon Hill, where locals have celebrated life's moments, big and small, for over 60 years. Rose earned her business degree from Boston University, graduating summa cum laude while working pre-dawn shifts at the bakery. She could have taken a high-paying corporate job like her classmates, but the moment her father fell ill, she knew where she belonged. Now, she starts every day at 4 a.m., mixing dough with the same wooden spoon her grandmother used, while adding her own modern twists to century-old recipes. What the regulars love most about Rose isn't just her famous cinnamon rolls or award-winning sourdough, it's how she remembers everyone's names, their usual orders, and the way she turns customers into family. Her small business savvy has turned the bakery into a neighborhood hub, hosting community events and providing job training for local youth. Every decision she makes isn't just about profit, it's about people. Single by choice and unapologetically independent, Rose has turned down 3 marriage proposals from perfectly nice men who couldn't understand why she'd choose 18-hour workdays over a comfortable suburban life. Her last relationship ended when her boyfriend called the bakery her cute little hobby and suggested she sell it to focus on their future. She showed him the door faster than her signature lightning-quick pie crust. To Rose, success isn't measured in dollars, it's counted in the smiles of elderly customers who've been coming in for decades, in the local students who find a quiet haven in her cafe, and in the satisfaction of knowing she's keeping her family's dream alive. But now, with a billion-dollar corporation threatening to demolish her block, Rose is about to prove that the girl who burns her candle at both ends isn't afraid to play with fire, even if that means going toe-to-toe with Boston's most notorious billionaire. Black tech industries cast long shadows across downtown Boston's skyline, its gleaming headquarters rising 60 stories into the New England sky. The building itself told Marcus Blackwood's story, every floor earned through ruthless determination, each glass panel reflecting the ambition that drove him from coding in a Chicago library to commanding a tech empire worth billions. Inside his top-floor office, Marcus stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sun rise over Boston Harbor. Below him, construction crews were already setting up, marking the boundaries of his newest project, a 20-block development that would transform aging storefronts into a cutting-edge innovation district. The plans spread across his desk showed sleek buildings, startup incubators, and artificial intelligence research centers. Phase 1 alone would create 10,000 jobs. His assistant, David, entered with the morning briefing. The City Council's preliminary vote is scheduled for next week. We've secured support from 6 of the 9 members. He paused, shuffling through papers. Though there's growing resistance from some local businesses in the target zone. Marcus didn't turn from the window. Resistance is expected. It's also irrelevant. The properties are undervalued, the area's declining, and our offer is more than generous. Progress doesn't pause for nostalgia. The morning sun caught the edge of a scale model on his desk, Blacktecker's vision for Boston's future. In 3 years, this historic district would become the East Coast's answer to Silicon Valley. Every detail was meticulously planned, every variable controlled. Marcus had built his empire by seeing opportunities others missed, by making the impossible inevitable. Send the final notices to the holdout businesses, he instructed. They have 30 days to accept our buyout offers before we pursue other options. His voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who'd never failed to close a deal. This project isn't just about real estate, it's about dragging Boston into the future. Sometimes, you have to tear down the old to build something better. The quarterly investors' meeting had just ended, and Marcus was enduring the usual post-presentation small talk. A board member's daughter, fresh out of business school and clearly primed by her father, was attempting to catch his attention. "Mr. Blackwood, I'd love to discuss your vision for tech innovation over dinner," she smiled, touching his arm. "I have some fascinating ideas about AI integration in urban development." Marcus stepped back smoothly, maintaining professional distance. "Send your proposals to our development team. They'll review any viable concepts." His tone was polite but final, brooking no argument. Later, in his office, David handed him a stack of magazines. "The press wants to know why Boston's most eligible bachelor remains single. They're running another most desirable CEO piece." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Tell them what we always do, I'm married to my work." He turned to his laptop, signaling the end of that conversation. But the memories came anyway, uninvited and sharp. 5 years ago, he'd found the evidence on Rebecca's laptop, confidential black tech files secretly transferred to their biggest competitor. The woman he'd trusted, who'd shared his bed and his dreams, had been selling his company's secrets the entire time. The prenup she'd fought against suddenly made sense. The late-night calls she'd claimed were to her sister? All to her real bosses. The betrayal had cost black tech millions, but it taught Marcus a priceless lesson: mixing business with pleasure was a fool's game. Love was a weakness competitors could exploit. Relationships were just elaborate traps wrapped in pretty promises. Now, his rules were simple and unbreakable. No dating. No relationships. No exceptions. His penthouse remained free of personal photos, his calendar clear of anniversary dates. Every decision, every action, served one purpose: expanding his empire. "Your entire life can't be about work," his mother often argued during their monthly calls. "My life is exactly what I've made it," he'd answer. And he meant it. In the battlefield of business, emotions were liabilities. He'd learned that lesson the hard way, paid for it in trust and blood. Never again. Dawn broke over Bennett's bakery as Rose kneaded dough with practiced hands, her grandmother's recipe spread across the flour-dusted counter. The morning quiet was broken only by the hum of ovens and the soft whir of mixers, her favorite time of day, before the world rushed in. But today, the peaceful ritual couldn't ease her worries. The latest bills lay stacked beside her, property taxes had doubled, utilities were climbing, and 3 corporate chains had opened nearby, their dollar coffees and mass-produced pastries threatening to steal her customers. The bank's latest letter about her loan application sat unopened. She already knew what it said. "You should sell, Rosie," her brother Michael had urged last week. "This neighborhood's changing. Take the money and start fresh somewhere else." He didn't understand that Bennett's wasn't just a business, it was 60 years of family history baked into every brick. She walked through the cafe, straightening chairs. Morning light streamed through windows that her father had installed himself, casting warmth on the wall of photos, her grandparents on opening day in 1963, her mother's first pie contest victory, Rose herself at 5, standing on a stepstool to reach the counter. Each memory was priceless, irreplaceable. The regulars were more than customers, they were family. Like Mr. Patterson, who'd proposed to his wife here 40 years ago and still came every anniversary. Or the college students who found refuge during finals week, whom Rose fed with leftover muffins and endless coffee refills. But sentiment wouldn't pay the bills. Rose had modernized where she could, adding online ordering, starting a catering service, hosting local art shows in the evenings. She'd even taken coding classes to build their website herself. Every penny of profit went back into the business, while she lived in the tiny apartment upstairs, just like her grandmother had. The neighborhood was gentrifying rapidly. 3 other family businesses had closed this year alone, replaced by shiny corporate chains. But Rose Bennett wasn't going down without a fight. This bakery had survived recession, urban renewal, and changing times. It would survive this too, she just had to figure out how. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, just as Rose pulled her signature cinnamon rolls from the oven. Official black-tech letterhead, cold corporate language about urban renewal and mandatory acquisition. Her hands shook as she read the buyout offer, generous by any standard, except the standard of 60 years of family history. That afternoon, she marched into Blacktech's gleaming headquarters, her grandmother's original business license clutched in her hand. The security desk tried to stop her, but Rose Bennett had inherited her grandmother's steel spine along with her recipes. "Mr. Blackwood isn't available for unscheduled appointments," his assistant stated firmly. "Then he can make himself available," Rose replied, voice carrying across the marble lobby. "Because I'm not leaving until he explains why he thinks he can put a price tag on my family's legacy." Marcus emerged from the elevator, drawn by the commotion. His tall frame cast a shadow across Rose's path, but she didn't step back. Instead, she lifted her chin, green eyes blazing. "Miss Bennett, I presume?" His voice was arctic. "If you have concerns, your lawyers can contact Dash." "No lawyers," she cut in. "Just you and me, having an honest conversation about why you think your tech hub is worth more than 3 generations of community history." "Business isn't about history," he countered. "It's about progress. Your block is underperforming. Our development will create thousands of jobs. Dash." "My bakery already creates jobs," Rose fired back. "It creates community. It gives people a place where they belong. Can your glass towers do that?" Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, surprise, maybe respect. Nobody challenged him like this anymore. "The offer is more than fair," he said. "Fair?" Rose stepped closer, jabbing a finger at his chest. "Come to my bakery tomorrow morning. See what you're really trying to destroy. Or are you afraid to look in the eyes of the people whose lives you're disrupting?" The lobby fell silent. Marcus studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Tomorrow, 7 a.m., he finally said. "Don't make me regret this, Miss Bennett." "Oh, Mr. Blackwood," Rose smiled sweetly, turning to leave. "Making you regret things is exactly what I plan to do. You know that feeling when someone powerful looks down at you and says your dreams don't matter? When they try to sweep away everything you've built with a wave of their hand. If you've ever stood your ground when the odds were stacked against you, hit that like button right now. And make sure you're subscribed, because what Rose does next, it's the kind of courage that changes lives. The kind that proves one person's determination can shake an empire. Trust me, you're about to witness something extraordinary. The next part of this story? It's going to light a fire in your soul. The Boston City Council chambers buzzed with tension. Marcus sat in the front row, surrounded by his team of lawyers and developers, their presentations polished and rehearsed. He barely glanced up when Rose walked in, but she made sure everyone else noticed her entrance. Wearing her grandmother's apron over her dress, Rose carried a basket of fresh bread. The warm, homey scent filled the austere chamber, drawing curious looks. As she made her way down the aisle, she handed a piece to each council member, each slice still warm from her ovens. "Members of the council," she began, her voice clear and strong. "What you're tasting isn't just bread. It's 3 generations of Boston history. My grandmother baked for your grandparents. My father stayed open during blizzards to feed emergency workers. That bread helped build this city, one loaf at a time." Marcus shifted in his seat as Rose pulled out weathered guest books from her bakery. In these pages are 60 years of Boston stories. First dates that led to marriages. Job interviews that launched careers. College students who found a home away from home. You can't measure that in dollars and cents. She turned to face Marcus directly. "Mr. Blackwood talks about progress. About the future. But he's forgotten something crucial. The heart of a city isn't in its skyline. It's in places like Bennett's Bakery, where community isn't just a buzzword in a corporate presentation." The council chamber fell silent as Rose placed a final loaf of bread on the podium. "Before you vote on this development, I challenge each of you to spend one morning in my bakery. Watch how many people find not just food, but belonging. Then tell me if replacing that with another glass tower is really progress." Marcus's jaw clenched as several council members nodded thoughtfully, some already breaking off pieces of their bread. Rose had done more than challenge his project, she'd made it personal. Made him the villain in a story about community versus corporate greed. And somehow, watching her stand there, fierce and unapologetic, he couldn't even be angry about it. Back in his office, Marcus couldn't shake the image of Rose at the council meeting. He'd faced down corporate raiders, hostile takeovers, and cutthroat competitors, but none of them had thrown him off balance quite like this baker with fire in her eyes. Standing at his window, he watched the sunset paint the city gold. The same view he'd seen 1,000 times, but tonight it looked different. He found himself wondering how the light would catch Rose's copper curls, how her eyes would flash if he challenged her again. "The PR team suggests we counter her emotional appeal with hard facts," David reported, placing a file on his desk. "Jobs created, tax revenue, technological advancement dash." She'd see right through it, Marcus interrupted, surprising himself. "She's not some naive small business owner we can overwhelm with statistics." His lips curved slightly. She handed out warm bread to the entire city council while wearing her grandmother's apron. That's either brilliant or insane." He caught himself almost smiling and quickly schooled his features. But the warmth in his chest wouldn't fade. It had been years since anyone had truly challenged him, years since he'd met someone who didn't back down in the face of his power. "Pull everything we have on Bennett's Bakery," he ordered. "Financial records, property history, customer demographics. I want to know everything." "Sir?" David looked confused. "We already have the basic data for the acquisition dash. Not the corporate overview. Everything. What they bake, when they open, who comes there. I want to understand." He paused, realizing he was revealing too much. "I want to understand what we're up against." But as David left, Marcus admitted the truth to himself. He didn't want to understand the bakery. He wanted to understand her, this woman who dared to stand up to him, who fought with passion instead of calculation. who made him feel something he hadn't felt in years, alive. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus found himself drawn to Bennett's bakery every morning, each visit sparking a new battle of wills. Today, he sat at the counter, his usual black coffee untouched, watching Rose work. "Your profit margins are unsustainable," he pointed out, tracking her movements as she served customers. "You're operating on passion, not business sense." Rose spun around, flour dusting her cheek. "Not everything valuable shows up on a spreadsheet, Mr. Blackwood." She leaned across the counter, close enough that he caught the scent of vanilla and cinnamon. "But since you're so concerned about my business model, here's today's numbers dash." "I don't need dash." "Oh, but you do," she cut him off, eyes sparking. 3 wedding cake orders, 2 corporate catering contracts, and 50 regulars who'd rather pay extra for real food and genuine smiles than save $1 at some soulless chain. He found himself leaning in too, the space between them crackling. And what happens when those regulars move on? When tastes change? Sentiment doesn't pay bills, Miss Bennett. "Rose," she corrected, not backing down. "If you're going to try to destroy my livelihood, you might as well use my first name." The corner of his mouth twitched. Rose. Her name felt dangerous on his tongue. "Your bakery is a relic. My development will bring this neighborhood into the future." "Your future?" she challenged, eyes locked on his. All glass and steel and people too busy looking at screens to see each other. "Is that really what you want your legacy to be?" For a moment, neither moved. The morning sunlight caught her hair, turning it to fire, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. He'd come to convince her, to break down her resistance. Instead, each encounter left him more unsettled, more aware of how empty his own carefully constructed world had become. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked, a hint of something softer in her voice. "Tomorrow," he agreed, standing to leave. Both pretending these daily debates were still just about business. Late one evening, as Rose was closing up, a familiar face appeared at her door, Kate Morgan, her old college roommate, now a tech journalist. "I saw your name linked to Blacktecker's development project," Kate said, settling at the counter while Rose wiped down tables. "Thought you might want some insider insight on the infamous Marcus Blackwood." Rose tried to seem casual, but her hand stilled on the table. "I know enough. Billionaire tech genius, thinks he can buy anything he wants dash." "Did you know about Rebecca?" Kate interrupted, pulling out her laptop. 5 years ago, it was supposed to be the society wedding of the year. Marcus Blackwood finally settling down with his perfect match. Rose's heart skipped. What happened? 3 days before the wedding, Marcus discovered she'd been selling company secrets the entire time. Years of corporate espionage, all while planning their future. Kate's voice softened. He didn't just lose his fiancée, he lost the last bit of trust he had in relationships. The press called it a business scandal, Kate continued. But my sources painted a different picture. Marcus had opened up to her about his childhood, his struggles, his dreams. She used it all against him, knew exactly which projects to target. Rose sank into a chair, remembering Marcus's words about sentiment being dangerous. About business being safer than feelings. They weren't just corporate mantras, they were scars. "Why are you telling me this?" Rose asked quietly. Kate closed her laptop. "Because yesterday, I saw him sitting at your counter, actually smiling." First time in 5 years anyone seen Marcus Blackwood look at someone that way. She stood to leave. Just thought you should know what you're dealing with. That wall around his heart? It's not just for show. It's self-preservation. The next morning, Rose arrived extra early to sort through the old storage room above the bakery. Her conversation with Kate had sparked something. If Marcus valued data so much, she'd give him history he couldn't ignore. In a dusty corner, she found it, her grandmother's first ledger from 1963. Inside, yellowed newspaper clippings told the story. Bennett's bakery had stayed open through Boston's darkest hours, feeding rescue workers during the blizzard of '78, providing free meals during the economic crash of the '80s. But it was a small black and white photo that made her gasp. A young boy, couldn't be more than 6, sitting at her grandmother's counter. The caption read, "Margaret Bennett feeds local children, ensures no one goes hungry during hard times." "That's my father," a deep voice said behind her. Rose spun around. Marcus stood in the doorway, looking at the photo with an expression she'd never seen before. "What?" she whispered. "Thomas Blackwood. Age 6. My father used to tell me about a bakery that fed him when times were tough. Said the owner never let him leave hungry, even when he couldn't pay." His fingers traced the photo's edge. "I never knew it was this place." Rose's throat tightened. "My grandmother Margaret. She believed nobody should go hungry, especially children." He credited that kindness for his drive to succeed, Marcus said quietly. Said it taught him that one person's compassion could change a life. He looked around the room, really seeing it now. "My father died before I made my first million. I always wanted to find that bakery, to thank them." Rose reached for another album. "Here, more photos from that time. Your father's name appears in Grandma's ledger at least 20 times." They sat together among the dusty boxes, piecing together a shared history neither had known existed. The morning light filtered through old windows, casting a warm glow on 60 years of community, kindness, and connection. Finally, Marcus looked at Rose, his eyes holding something new. "I think," he said slowly, "we need to talk about a different kind of future for this block." The next day, the storm hit Boston without warning, turning the summer evening into chaos. Rose hadn't meant to stay so late at the bakery, but tomorrow's wedding cake order needed perfect fondant roses, and she'd lost track of time. Now, thunder rattled the windows as she tried to hail a cab on the deserted street. A sleek black car pulled up, and the window rolled down. Marcus sat in the driver's seat, his usual perfect suit slightly rumpled, his tie loose around his neck. "Get in," he said, eyeing the darkening sky. "This storm's only getting worse." Rose hesitated, raindrops soaking through her thin blouse. "I'm fine, really dash." A crack of lightning split the sky, followed by immediate thunder that shook the ground. Marcus leaned across and opened the passenger door. "That wasn't a suggestion, Rose." She slid into the leather seat, warmth enveloping her as the door closed. The car smelled like him, expensive cologne and coffee. "What are you even doing here so late?" "Working." He navigated through the rain-slicked streets. "Some of us don't have the luxury of closing at 6. "It's nearly midnight," she pointed out, watching his profile in the scattered streetlights. "Don't billionaires believe in sleep?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Sleep is for people who've achieved their goals." He glanced at her, adding softly, "or people who know how to be content with what they have." The storm intensified, rain hammering against the windshield. visibility dropped to nearly nothing. Marcus pulled over, engine idling. "We should wait it out," he said, loosening his tie further. "Unless you're eager to test my driving skills in hurricane conditions." Rose nodded, suddenly very aware of how small the car felt, how close he was. Thunder rolled overhead, but the silence between them felt louder. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For stopping. Most people wouldn't have." "I'm not most people." His voice was low, almost vulnerable in the dark. "No," Rose agreed, watching rain trail down the window. "You're definitely not." "The storm's not letting up," Marcus said after 20 minutes. "The bakery's closer than either of our homes. We could wait there." Back inside Bennett's, Rose lit the old hurricane lamps her grandmother had always kept for emergencies. The warm light transformed the space, making it feel intimate, almost magical. "I should check the freezers," Rose said. "Power's been flickering." She headed to the kitchen, then turned. "Make yourself useful. There's coffee beans in the top cabinet." To her surprise, Marcus shed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. Soon, the rich scent of fresh coffee filled the dark bakery. He worked the professional machine with unexpected skill. "You know your way around coffee," she observed. "Worked as a barista through college," he admitted. Before the tech dreams paid off. Rose pulled out day-old pastries that would have gone to the shelter tomorrow anyway. They sat at the counter, the storm raging outside while they shared coffee and maple walnut scones. "These are incredible," Marcus said, reaching for another. "Family recipe." "My grandmother." Rose stopped, realizing he probably didn't care about family stories. "Tell me," he said softly. "Please." So she did. About her grandmother teaching her to bake at 4, standing on a milk crate to reach the counter. About her father adding the cafe section when coffee shops became popular, adapting while keeping tradition. About the regulars who'd become family, birthdays celebrated, losses mourned, victories shared. Marcus listened, really listened, watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. When she mentioned the weekly bread donations to local shelters, something shifted in his expression. "This is what you meant," he said slowly. "About value not showing up on spreadsheets." A crash of thunder made Rose jump. Marcus reached out instinctively, his hand covering hers on the counter. Neither pulled away. "Your world," he said quietly, "it's so different from mine. Everything here has meaning. Stories. Heart." Rose turned her hand under his, their fingers intertwining. "Your world could have that too, you know. If you let it." The next day, the morning newspaper hit Marcus's desk like a bomb. The headline glared up at him, "Sterling Developments Moves on Historic Boston District." His grip tightened on his coffee cup as he read about James Sterling's competing bid for the neighborhood, a bid that included eminent domain proceedings and zero compensation for existing businesses. His phone buzzed, Rose's name lighting up the screen. Before he could answer, David rushed in. "Sterling's offering the city twice the tax revenue we projected," David reported. "And he's got 3 council members ready to flip their votes." Marcus's jaw clenched. James Sterling was known for his slash-and-burn development style, buying historic properties, demolishing them overnight before preservation orders could be filed. No warning, no negotiations, no mercy. "Rose needs to know," he said, already heading for the elevator. He found her outside the bakery, staring at the legal notice taped to her window. Her face was pale, but her spine was steel. "Sterling's people were here an hour ago," she said without turning. "Told me I had 48 hours to accept their offer before they start legal proceedings. It's less than half what you offered." "I know Sterling," Marcus said, stepping closer. "He'll destroy everything, Rose. Not just the bakery, the whole neighborhood. No preservation, no relocation assistance. He builds fast cash properties and flips them." "Why do you care?" she challenged, finally facing him. "Isn't this perfect? I'll be forced to sell either way. You get your development zone without being the bad guy." "Because I've seen what Sterling does to communities," Marcus shot back. "Because your bakery matters." "Because he stopped, realizing he'd said too much. Rose studied his face. "Because what?" Before he could answer, his phone buzzed again. Sterling was calling an emergency council meeting for tomorrow morning. They had 24 hours to stop a deal that would destroy not just Bennett's bakery, but everything it stood for. "We need to work together," Marcus said. "Your community connections, my corporate influence. It's the only way to stop him." Rose nodded slowly. "Partners?" "Partners," he agreed, trying to ignore how right that word felt. The next 24 hours turned Bennett's bakery into their war room. Rose's laptop sat next to Marcus's on the counter, spreadsheets mixed with recipe books. Their shoulders brushed as they worked, each contact sending electricity through them both. "These property assessments," Rose said, pointing to her screen. "They prove Sterling's undervaluing everything. If we combine this with the historical significance data we can challenge his entire proposal," Marcus finished, leaning closer to see. Her scent, vanilla and coffee, made it hard to focus. "We need community impact statements. Fast." "Already on it." Rose grabbed her phone, calling longtime customers. Her passion as she fought for her community made Marcus's chest tight. This was the fire that had drawn him to her from the start. They worked through the night, drinking coffee that grew steadily stronger. Rose caught Marcus watching her instead of his screen more than once. She pretended not to notice how his hand lingered when passing documents, how he stood closer than necessary when reviewing papers. At dawn, exhausted but prepared, they faced each other in the soft morning light. "Whatever happens," Rose said, straightening Marcus's tie before catching herself and pulling back. "Thank you for helping save more than just my bakery, Rose." His voice was rough. He caught her hand before she could step away. "You should know, Her phone rang. The council meeting was starting early. The moment shattered. "We should go," she said quickly, gathering their materials. But her fingers had curled into his for just a second before letting go. In his car, driving to City Hall, the silence hummed with everything unsaid. They both knew that after this, nothing would be the same. Either they'd save the neighborhood together or lose it all. Either way, the careful walls they'd built around their hearts were already crumbling. "Ready?" Marcus asked as they pulled up to City Hall. Rose met his eyes. "Together?" He nodded, and for once, the most powerful man in Boston wasn't thinking about business at all. "My dear Story family, if your heart's racing right now, if you're feeling that tension between what your head says and what your heart knows is right, quickly click on that like button. Because what happens next in this story? It's about to redefine what real power looks like. You think you know where this battle between Rose and Marcus is heading? Trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. Their next moves will show you what happens when two unstoppable forces finally let their guards down. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, because this next part, it's going to shake you to your core. Now let's get back into our story. This is professional suicide, Marcus. Richard Bennett, Black Tech's lead director, paced the boardroom like a caged animal. You're throwing away $1 billion development to save what, a bakery? Marcus stood at the window, watching the sun rise over Boston. The same view that used to fill him with pride now felt hollow. I'm proposing a better plan. Sustainable development that preserves the neighborhood's character while cutting our profits in half. Another board member slammed his hand on the table. All because some baker batted her eyes at you? Marcus turned, his voice arctic. Careful. No, you be careful. Richard stepped closer. The board has called an emergency vote for tomorrow. Either you proceed with the original development plan, or we replace you. It's that simple. Nothing about this is simple. Marcus straightened his tie, a gesture Rose had made just days ago. You're asking me to destroy something valuable. We're asking you to be who you've always been, Richard cut in. The Ice King of Tech. The man who never lets emotion cloud his judgment. Remember him? The other board members watched silently as Richard delivered the final blow. Your father built things, Marcus. Real things. Not fairy tales about community and preservation. What would he say if he could see you now? Marcus's jaw tightened. They didn't know about the photo, about his father's stories of the bakery that had helped shape his future. They saw only numbers, not legacy. You have 24 hours, Richard said. Save your career or save your baker. You can't do both. After they filed out, Marcus sat alone in the darkening boardroom. On his phone, a text from Rose, need to talk. Important. His thumb hovered over her name. Everything he'd built, everything he'd sacrificed for, all hanging in the balance. And somehow, none of it seemed to matter as much as the thought of letting her down. You're being stubborn, Rose. Her brother Michael paced the bakery's kitchen, while their mother sat quietly at the prep table. Sterling's new offer is more than we could make in 10 years. 10 years. Rose continued kneading dough, each push and fold helping her maintain control. This isn't about money, Michael. This is about Don't say legacy, he interrupted. Legacy doesn't pay for Mom's medical bills. Legacy doesn't secure our future. Their mother touched the worn surface of the prep table, the same one their grandmother had used. Maybe Michael's right, sweetheart. Times change. Nothing lasts forever. Rose's hand stilled in the dough. Mom, you can't mean that. This bakery was your life. Dad's life. And now it's your life, her mother said softly. That's what worries me. You're fighting so hard to save this place, you're not living. No relationship, no time for yourself. And now this battle with Sterling. She's not just fighting Sterling, Michael said sharply. She's too busy falling for Marcus Blackwood. The dough dropped from Rose's hands. That's not Please, Michael scoffed. The whole neighborhood's talking. How you spend hours in private meetings. How he's here every morning. Are you really saving the bakery, Rose, or are you just trying to save something that can't exist between you two? You don't understand, Rose whispered. No, you don't understand. Michael's voice rose. Sterling's people called me. If we don't sell now, they'll tie this place up in legal battles until we go bankrupt. Is that what Dad would have wanted? To watch his life's work die because his daughter fell for the wrong guy? Rose gripped the edge of the counter, flour dusting her knuckles white. On the wall, decades of family photos watched her struggle: her parents' wedding day in the bakery, her first day working the register, her father's last Christmas before he got sick. Her phone buzzed. Marcus's name lit up the screen. "Choose wisely, sis," Michael said, heading for the door. "Before you lose everything, including him." After they left, Rose touched her father's old apron, still hanging on its hook. "What would you do, Dad?" she whispered to the empty kitchen. "How do you fight for love when it feels like you're losing everything else?" The headlines exploded across Boston's business news: Black tech CEO's secret romance compromises billion-dollar deal. James Sterling's media machine had done its work well. Marcus slammed the newspaper down on his desk as David rushed in with more reports. Local blogs were running with the story: how Marcus had allegedly promised Rose special treatment, how she'd seduced him to save her bakery, how their affair had cost investors millions. "Sterling's people are feeding the press everything," David said. "They're painting you as a love-struck fool and her as a manipulative gold digger. Get our PR team dash." "It's worse," David interrupted. "Someone leaked photos. You and Rose during the storm. Working late at the bakery. Getting coffee." Marcus's phone lit up with a text from Rose: "Turn on Channel 5. The local news was running security camera footage of them in his car that night of the storm, the anchor's voice dripping with innuendo. Sources close to Black Tech question if their CEO's judgment has been compromised by a personal relationship with a local business owner. Then came the financial shows. Black Tech's stock dropped 12 points as investors questioned Blackwood's leadership. His phone buzzed again, Rose sending a link. Her bakery's review page was flooded with fake complaints: owner too busy dating billionaires to care about quality. Trades more than just bread to get ahead. Marcus's hands clenched. He'd been called cold, ruthless, even cruel, but his integrity had never been questioned. And Rose, they were dragging her name through the mud to get to him. "The board wants a statement," David said quietly. Denying any personal involvement, reaffirming the original development plan. "Get me Sterling's number," Marcus growled. "Sir?" "Now." When Sterling answered, his smug tone made Marcus's blood boil. "Enjoying the press, Blackwood?" Amazing what a few well-placed rumors can do. "You're playing a dangerous game," Marcus warned. "No," Sterling chuckled. "I'm winning one. Question is, what matters more? Your reputation or your baker girls?" Later that day, Rose found Marcus in her bakery after closing, sitting in the dark. She flipped on a single light, casting soft shadows across his troubled face. "My PR team statement is ready," he said without looking up. "Denying everything. Calling our relationship purely professional. It should help calm the media storm." "Is that what you want?" Rose asked quietly. "To deny everything?" Marcus finally met her eyes. "What I want stopped mattering the moment I realized I couldn't bear to see them hurt you. They're hurting you too." She moved closer, drawn to him despite everything. "Your company, your reputation dash. All built on being cold. Untouchable." His laugh was bitter. The Ice King of Tech, remember? Turns out ice can melt. Rose reached for him, then stopped herself. We could end this. Tell everyone you're proceeding with the original development. I'll sell to Sterling Dash. No, Marcus stood abruptly, closing the distance between them. I won't let him destroy this place. Destroy you. Then what do we do? Her voice cracked. Every time we try to save the bakery, we risk your company. Every time we meet, they twist it into something ugly. Every time I look at you. You look at me how? His voice was rough. Like I'm tired of pretending this is just about business. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Like maybe losing everything wouldn't be so bad if. Marcus's hand cupped her cheek, and the world stopped spinning. If what? If I got to keep you instead. The space between them vanished. His lips found hers, gentle at first, then deepening as 5 months of tension finally broke. Rose's hands gripped his shirt, pulling him closer as his fingers tangled in her hair. When they finally parted, breathless, the reality of their situation crashed back. They'll destroy us both, she whispered against his chest. Let them try. His arms tightened around her. Some things are worth fighting for. Neither moved, holding on to this moment before the storm broke. Tomorrow would bring more battles, more choices between head and heart. But for now, in the quiet of her bakery, they let themselves imagine a future where they didn't have to choose. Rose hadn't meant to stay so late organizing the bakery's financial records, but something in the numbers caught her eye. The property tax payments for the last 3 months, they were lower than they should be. Much lower. A knock at the door made her jump. Tom from the flower shop next door stood there, holding a stack of papers. Sorry to bother you so late, he said, stepping in from the cold. But I saw your light on, and I needed to ask, have you noticed anything strange with your accounts lately? Rose's heart skipped. Like unusually low tax payments. And reduced utility bills, Tom nodded. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I talked to Maria at the bookstore, and Louis at the cafe. All the small businesses on the block, Rose finished, pieces clicking into place. Someone's been helping us, Tom confirmed. Anonymously. Covering portions of our expenses through a shell company. I did some digging, traced it back to a private foundation. Guess who owns it? Rose sank into a chair. Marcus. The same man who's supposedly trying to tear down our neighborhood, Tom said softly, has been quietly keeping half the businesses here afloat for months. Rose's hands trembled as she pulled up the foundation's records on her laptop. There it was, millions in anonymous aid to small businesses across Boston, all traced back to Marcus Blackwood's private accounts. Not company money, his personal funds. Why wouldn't he tell anyone, she whispered. Tom smiled. Maybe because real kindness doesn't need an audience. After he left, Rose found herself staring at the old photo of Marcus's father at her grandmother's counter. The boy who grew up to raise a son who understood, bone deep, the value of community. Who fought for it in secret while playing the cold-hearted developer in public. Her phone felt heavy in her hand as she typed, I know what you've been doing for the neighborhood. His response came seconds later, someone once helped my father when he needed it most. I'm just paying it forward. The email arrived at midnight. Marcus almost deleted it until he saw the sender, Rebecca's brother, who he hadn't heard from since the scandal 5 years ago. I found something you need to see. Rebecca's real files. She wasn't working alone. Attached was a video file, security footage from 5 years ago. In it, Rebecca sat in Sterling's office, tears streaming down her face as she signed papers. "You don't understand," her voice cracked through the speakers. "I can't do this anymore. Marcus trusts me. Sterling's voice cut in, smooth as oil. "Your brother's medical bills say otherwise. Remember our deal, you get us Black Tech's development plans or his treatment stops. Your choice." Marcus's hands gripped his desk. All these years, he'd thought she'd played him. Used him. But Sterling had trapped her, used her brother's illness as leverage. The video continued. Rebecca's voice shook. "Once we're married, I'll have legal access. I won't have to steal Dash." "You'll do exactly as we say," Sterling snapped. "Or should I remind you what happens if you don't?" The footage ended. Marcus sat in the dark, his whole world tilting on its axis. His phone buzzed. Rebecca's brother again. "She died last year. Cancer. Before she went, she made me promise to tell you the truth. She never stopped loving you, Marcus." Sterling forced her hand. The walls of Marcus's office felt like they were closing in. 5 years of bitterness, of keeping everyone at arm's length because of a betrayal that wasn't what he'd thought at all. His phone lit up with Rose's name. Sweet, fierce Rose, who'd somehow slipped past all his defenses. Who fought for what she believed in, no matter the cost. He'd been so wrong. Love wasn't a weakness Sterling could exploit. It was strength. The kind that made you stand up to bullies. Fight for others. Risk everything for what mattered. "You okay?" Rose's text read. "You missed our morning coffee battle." Marcus smiled through the tears he hadn't realized were falling. "On my way," he typed back. "And Rose? I need to tell you something important." The call came at 3 a.m. Fire at Bennett's bakery. Marcus was in his car before the word "a fire" finished echoing through his phone. He reached the bakery just as Rose burst through the smoke-filled doorway, clutching a metal box to her chest. "The recipes," she coughed. "Had to save grandmother's recipes." Marcus caught her as her knees buckled, pulling her away from the building. Flames licked up the historic brick walls, turning the night orange. Fire trucks wailed in the distance. "What happened?" he demanded, checking her for injuries. "Electrical fire. Started in the wall." Rose struggled to stand. "The photos, Dad's pictures are still inside. I have to." "No," Marcus held her back as she fought him. "It's not safe. You don't understand." Tears cut tracks through the soot on her face. "Everything we are is in there. Everything we've built." The front window exploded outward in a shower of glass and sparks. Rose screamed, not in fear, but in pure anguish. Marcus pulled her closer, turning her away from the sight of her world burning. Firefighters swarmed the scene. Marcus's phone buzzed constantly, board members, no doubt hearing about their CEO racing to a burning bakery in the middle of the night. His career might well be going up in flames along with Rose's legacy. He didn't care. Rose trembled in his arms as the firefighters battled the blaze. "I can't lose it," she whispered. "I can't lose them all over again." Marcus looked at the woman who'd changed everything for him, then at the burning building that held her heart. In that moment, his choice became crystal clear. You won't, he promised. Then he was running, ducking under the firefighter's barrier. Marcus, no! He disappeared into the smoke-filled bakery. Seconds stretched into eternities until he emerged, clutching the wall of framed family photos, his expensive suit ruined and singed. As paramedics rushed to check him, Rose reached for the photos with shaking hands. Her father's smile beamed back at her through the smoky glass. You could have died, she breathed. Marcus caught her hand, squeezing gently. Some things are worth the risk. The morning after the fire, Rose sat in Marcus's penthouse, carefully cleaning smoke damage from the rescued photos. Her fingers traced her grandmother's face in the oldest picture, and froze. Marcus, she called softly. Look at this. He crossed from the kitchen, coffee cups in hand. The photo showed her grandmother outside the bakery's grand opening in 1963. But it wasn't Margaret Bennett that made Rose's heart stop, it was the couple standing beside her. Those are my grandparents, Marcus whispered. But how dash? Rose flipped the photo over. In faded ink, her grandmother's handwriting read, Opening Day with Robert and Marie Blackwood, first investors in Bennett's Bakery. They believed in me when no bank would loan to a woman, Rose read from her grandmother's old diary, found in the rescued metal box. Robert said anyone who could bake like this deserved a chance. Their investment saved my dream. Marcus sank down beside her. My grandfather never mentioned. They didn't just help with money, Rose continued reading. Marie worked our counter that first year, teaching me about business. When their son Thomas needed a safe place. She looked up at Marcus. Your father. All these years, Marcus said quietly, I thought my connection to your bakery started with my father being fed there. But our family stories were woven together from the very beginning. Rose leaned into him, their fingers intertwining over the old photo. Maybe some things are just meant to be. Maybe, Marcus agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. Or maybe we just finally figured out what our grandparents knew all along, that the best investments aren't about money at all. Now I want to ask you, my dear story family. Have you ever been in this position where your heart pulled you one way while your mind screamed another? That moment when doing that smart thing feels completely wrong? Drop a comment below and share your story, because Rose is about to face the biggest choice of her life. Everything she thought she knew about love, legacy, and loyalty is about to be tested. You won't want to miss what happens next. Her decision will change not just her future, but the fate of an entire community. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this ending, it's going to take your breath away. Now let's get back into it. Marcus stood before Blacktecker's board of directors, his presentation ready. But instead of his usual charts and projections, he placed a single piece of charred wood on the conference table. This, he said quietly, is from Bennett's Bakery. A business that survived 60 years of change until a fire nearly destroyed it last night. A fire that made me realize what we've been missing. Richard shifted impatiently. Marcus, if this is another plea for preservation dash. This is about evolution. Marcus clicked to his first slide. I present the Heritage Innovation District. A development that doesn't destroy history, it builds on it. The screens filled with renderings, modern buildings rising around restored historic structures. Bennett's Bakery stood at the heart, its classic facade preserved, but expanded. Instead of another soulless tech hub, we create something unique. Small businesses on ground level, tech startups above. Community spaces merged with innovation centers. A place where old and new don't just coexist, they thrive together. He laid out the numbers. Our original plan promised 12% returns. This plan? He paused for effect. 20%. Because we're not just building offices, we're creating a destination. A place with character, history, and heart. The board members leaned forward as Marcus revealed partnerships with local businesses, innovation grants for existing shops to modernize, and a community development fund. Sterling wants to bulldoze and build, Marcus continued. But I learned something from a baker who fights for what matters. Sometimes the strongest foundations are built on history. And if we refuse? Richard challenged. Marcus straightened. Then I'll resign, liquidate my personal shares, and fund this project myself. Because some legacies are worth fighting for. The room fell silent. Then old Thomas Wheeler, who'd served on the board since Marcus's father's time, began to smile. Your father, he said softly, would be proud. Not just of the business sense, but of the heart behind it. While Marcus faced his board, Rose walked into the Boston Business Journal's offices, carrying a box of fresh pastries and decades of proof that would change everything. You've been running stories about Marcus Blackwood, she told the editor, spreading documents across his desk. Now here's the real one. She laid out the evidence, bank records showing Marcus's private foundation supporting small businesses across Boston. Photos of her grandmother with his grandparents. The security footage revealing Sterling's manipulation of Rebecca. Marcus Blackwood isn't the cold-hearted developer you've painted him as, Rose said, her voice firm. And I'm not some gold digger trying to save my business. The editor studied the documents. You realize publishing this will make you a target? Sterling's lawyers dash. Will come after me, not you. Rose straightened. I'll sign whatever you need. But this truth needs to be told. She pulled out one final piece, her deed to Bennett's bakery. I'm putting everything on the line. My business, my reputation, my future. Because I believe in him, and in what we're trying to build. Her phone buzzed. It was her brother, Michael, warning her not to do this. Early that morning, her mother already begged her to think about the consequences. But Rose thought of Marcus, standing alone before his board, fighting for her community. Mr. Blackwood doesn't know I'm here, she told the editor. He'd probably try to stop me, protect me from the fallout. But sometimes love means fighting battles for each other, even if you have to fight alone. The editor picked up the security footage of Sterling. This could destroy Sterling's reputation. It could save dozens of small businesses, Rose corrected. Not just mine, every shop and restaurant he's tried to bully out of existence. She stood to leave, then turned back. You asked why I'd risk everything for Marcus Blackwood? Because he taught me that real strength isn't in tearing things down, it's in building them up. Together. The next day, the headlines broke like a tidal wave. Sterling schemes exposed alongside Black Tech unveils revolutionary heritage innovation district. But it was the photo beneath that captured Boston's heart. Marcus and Rose, standing in Bennett's fire-damaged bakery, his suit dusty with soot, her apron covered in flour, both smiling as they shared coffee with clean-up volunteers. You could have told me your plan, Marcus said later, as they sat among the renovation crews transforming the bakery. The damage from the fire was being repaired, but with unexpected additions, high-tech ovens alongside the original brick ones, modern cafe space merging seamlessly with vintage details. You could have told me yours, Rose countered, gesturing to the builders installing smart glass windows that could shift from clear to display digital menus. A tech-enhanced historic bakery? The best of both worlds, Marcus smiled, pulling her close. Like us. The renovation became a symbol of their shared vision. Rose taught coding classes in the cafe after hours, helping local shop owners modernize their businesses. Marcus held board meetings over fresh-baked bread, his corporate team gradually warming to the comfort of the vintage space. "You've changed him," David told Rose one morning, watching Marcus help an elderly customer with her phone order. "I've never seen him so human?" Rose suggested. "Happy," David corrected. The press dubbed it the Bennett-Blackwood model, a new approach to urban development that preserved community while embracing innovation. Other cities began reaching out, wanting to replicate their success. But it was the small moments that meant the most. Marcus learning to knead dough with Rose's patient guidance. Rose mastering the art of corporate negotiations, proving just as skilled in the boardroom as she was in the kitchen. "We're quite a pair," Marcus mused one evening as they closed up together. The Ice King and the Baker. Rose reached up, brushing flour from his cheek. "Not anymore. Now we're just us. Building something new." 6 months after the fire, Bennett's Bakery reopened its doors. But it wasn't just a bakery anymore, it had become something entirely new. The restored historic facade opened into a warm, welcoming space where old met new. The original counter, lovingly restored, now featured digital displays showing the day's specials alongside handwritten recipe cards. The ancient brick walls housed smart screens where local artists displayed their work. In the expanded cafe space, startup founders shared tables with longtime residents. College students coded on laptops while enjoying Rose's grandmother's famous cinnamon rolls. A corner that once stored flour now hosted a tech training center where Rose taught senior citizens how to connect with grandchildren online. "This is better than I ever dreamed," Rose's mother whispered during the grand reopening, watching her daughter demonstrate the bakery's new ordering app to elderly customers. "Your father would have loved this." Marcus stood back, observing as Rose moved through the crowd. She stopped to help a young girl use the bakery's 3D printer to decorate a cake, then turned to assist an old friend setting up their new business website. The Heritage Innovation District was growing around them, each building following their model of honoring the past while embracing the future. But Bennett remained its heart, a place where community wasn't just a word, but a living, breathing thing. "Ready for the announcement?" Marcus asked, joining Rose at the counter. She nodded, taking his hand as they faced their gathered community. Together, they revealed the Bennett-Blackwood Foundation, a fund to help other small businesses adapt and thrive in the modern age without losing their soul. "Because everyone deserves a chance to keep their dreams alive," Rose said, squeezing Marcus's hand. "And everyone deserves someone who believes in those dreams," he added softly. Above them, the bakery's old sign had been restored, with a small addition. Under Bennett's Bakery, estimated 1963, glowed the words, "Where tradition meets tomorrow." Just like them, a perfect blend of past and future, of heart and innovation, of two worlds that turned out to be exactly what each other needed. You know, sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about perfect timing or fairy tale meetings. They're about two people brave enough to challenge each other, to break down walls they thought they needed. Marcus and Rose taught us that true strength isn't in standing alone, it's in finding someone who makes you want to be better. Someone who sees past your defenses to who you really are. When we let go of our fears, when we dare to be vulnerable, that's when love shows us what we're truly capable of becoming. Life has this beautiful way of bringing love into our lives when we least expect it. Sometimes it arrives disguised as our greatest challenge, wrapped in circumstances that seem designed to push us apart. For Marcus and Rose, it began as a battle between progress and tradition, between walls and warmth, between a man who'd forgotten how to feel and a woman who felt everything deeply. Their story reminds us that the heart doesn't follow business plans or logical decisions. It finds its own path, often leading us exactly where we need to be, even if it's not where we thought we were going. A billionaire who believed love was a weakness found strength in a baker's courage. A woman fighting to preserve her past discovered her future in the arms of the man who'd once threatened to tear it all down. And yes, they did get there happily ever after. On a bright spring morning, Marcus and Rose exchanged vows in the renovated bakery where their story began. Her in a vintage dress that matched her grandmother's wedding photo, him in a suit dusted with just a touch of flour from their morning baking tradition. The ceremony blended their worlds perfectly. Corporate titans sat beside local shop owners, tech innovators mingled with longtime customers. The wedding cake was a masterpiece of old and new, Rose's classic recipe decorated with edible gold and digital projections that told their story in moving images across its surface. Instead of traditional vows, they shared their promises over bread kneading, their hands working together as they spoke of trust, growth, and building a future that honored both their dreams. Marcus vowed to always save room for sweetness in his life. Rose promised to help him break down walls one batch of cookies at a time. Their first dance took place where they'd first argued, where they'd first realized that opposition could turn to attraction, that enemies could become everything. The old brick walls, now restored and strengthened, witnessed the Ice King of Tech finally melting completely in his baker's arms. They honeymooned in Italy, visiting ancient bakeries and modern tech hubs alike. But they couldn't wait to return home, to their bakery, their community, their perfectly blended life where morning meetings over muffins became their new normal, where every day brought a fresh chance to prove that love could bridge any divide. My beautiful story family, if this story touched your heart, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales that remind us of love's power to transform lives. Drop a comment below and share your own story of unexpected love. I read every single one. Join our growing family of dreamers and believers here on the channel, where we celebrate real love in all its beautiful forms. Until our next story, remember, sometimes the best chapters of our lives begin when we're brave enough to let love surprise us. See you in our next adventure.